Hello, I'm Bob Morgan with the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. Honored to be in the South Carolina State House in the governor's office with Governor Henry McMaster. Governor, thank you for taking some time out of your day to talk about cybersecurity to our audience of those participating in our cybersecurity conference.
Bob, thank you. Very happy to have this opportunity. Cybersecurity, as we all know, is getting to be more and more important and more a part of our lives. The more we know about it, the more safely we can operate, the more resilient we can be, the more immune from troublemakers and attack, the better off we could be across the board. So it's very important.
Okay. How long has cybersecurity been on our radar screen?
Well, that's a good question. I know in the state, Governor Haley, I think it's just before she left office, she had started a cybersecurity work group. Mm-hmm. And then when I arrived in April, I arrived in January of 2017, but in April of 2017, following up on her work, we created a task force. It consisted of the State Law Enforcement Division, Department of Administration, a lot of private industry, power companies, water utilities, private businesses. And also we took advantage of our connections with the University of South Carolina, with the Cyber Command Center that's going up at Fort Gordon in Augusta. And so it's been an issue, it's been a subject for a number of years, but with the hacking and other things that have gone on in recent years, I think people have realized more and more how important it is to be secure. Now, there's a lot of industry, there are a lot of businesses, there's a brand new arena opening up all around the world for this kind of work, both for security and using the cyber capabilities for commerce. But it's right at the top of the list now because we know how important it is.
So that commission made some very specific recommendations for South Carolina state government to do. Do you think those recommendations will be adopted, and if so, why?
Yes, sir. Why not? I think so. One was to have a group, and that's what we did with the task force with SLED, the Department of Administration, and also we have collaborations going on with the University of South Carolina. Now that's very important. Just coincidentally, General Caslin, now President Caslin of the university, was very much involved when he was a three-star general in the Army, and before in the Cyber Command that has now been created at Fort Gordon in Georgia. Also, we have the Savannah River National Lab here that has interest. And through the university, we have one of the branches, the four-year branch in Aiken, which is right across the river from Fort Gordon. We've put $15 million in the 21-22 budget, and I think the legislature is going to do that, and that's going to be matched with federal funds. The Undersecretary of Energy was here several months ago, and we made that announcement. That's going to be at USC Aiken. So we are probably ahead of most other places in the structure, the kind of infrastructure and brain power that we need to put this together. So those recommendations are being made, but the plan to assess our needs and our assets is being done right now as we speak by the University of South Carolina. So we have the brain power and structure and infrastructure and interest that we need to find out exactly which way we can be most productive and successful. But I'll tell you, with the assets, with the Cyber Command that the Army or the Department of Defense is spending billions of dollars in, and the power of the University of South Carolina with 50,000 students, the academic firepower, the professors, the researchers, and all of that, as well as a business community that is ready, willing, and able to get involved and take advantage of all the assets and opportunities in this new arena. I think South Carolina is positioned to be enormously competitive.
You know, I know you're someone who thinks regionally. What a great example of, or reminder that the economy doesn't stop at the state line. We're talking about a fort that's in Georgia, and yet tremendous opportunity for South Carolina.
Well, that's right. And if you're up in an airplane and you fly along, you see the river, but you don't see any state lines. And we have a lot of collaboration and cooperation going on over state lines, but a lot of it is based, Bob, on not only the institutions we have here and others, but the people of our state are really remarkable. That's what a lot of the business leaders from around the world tell me when we're talking about the opportunities here that they have, that we have, where we can collaborate with new businesses and expansions. But they always say that the people of South Carolina are different from a lot of the places they go, and one reason is because they call us a handshake state. They say when someone from South Carolina gives you their word, they keep it. And I say, well, isn't that the way it is everywhere? And they say, oh no, a lot of places you have to write everything down. You got to be very, very careful. But also they say, and General Mark Clark said, when he was in World War II and also came back and was president of the Citadel, and he remarked on the patriotism in South Carolina. Said there's nothing like it anywhere in the world, and that means loyalty, determination, all those things. So in our state, we have people who know each other, who are open and willing to work together on a variety of things, and a lot of times just one phone call makes things happen. And in a new arena like this, where things are moving so quickly, so fast, in order to really be successful, that's an asset that we have that is going, I think, is going to make things, make prosperity come a lot quicker, a lot stronger, make a lot of people happy. They'll have good, they'll be able to earn, they'll be able to invest, they'll be able to be happy and contribute.
That's wonderful. You're king for the day. What are 3 things about cybersecurity that you would change and why?
Well, I think the main thing I would do is to continue on the path that we're going. I wouldn't change, I would accelerate, and that's what we're trying to do now with the firepower of the university, of the state law enforcement division that has a lot of highly technical cyber security and capabilities. Also, in Charleston, the National Information Warfare Systems Command is there. I mentioned Fort Gordon. The Savannah River National Lab is expanding into some of these areas now. And again, we're perfectly positioned in Aiken with a branch of the university, a four-year school right there, right on the edge of that. And we're working with the city. We're working with the national lab, working with the cyber command and businesses in that area. We have an advanced manufacturing center right there now. It is just all coming our way so well that there's nothing to change. We got to take advantage of it, to be aware of it. And the main thing is to through conferences like this is to make the businesses aware of these opportunities. We went out of state speaking to a big company that has business in South Carolina. They have a large facility here. And in speaking to the leadership there, they were unaware of a lot of the things that we have to offer with programs, with our Ready SC through the technical college system, and how we interact with the research universities and the four-year schools. They were unaware of these programs, and this is a big company. I mean, they are very successful, but they could be even more successful, they were telling us, if they take advantage of some of and they just didn't know about it is the point. So through conferences like this, if we can keep this up and keep the information flowing, and now with the advantage of things on the internet and websites, it makes it a whole lot easier to do all of that. But if we can inform all our businesses of what is available, what's coming down the road, how to get positioned, where they can get research, where they can get information, then that'll take South Carolina right straight to the top in this. And we're already at the top in building things. We build fighter planes in Greenville and passenger planes down in Charleston, and Volvos, Mercedes, BMWs. You know, the BMW plant in Greer produced more vehicles during the late 2020 than any of their 31 plants in the world. 31 plants in 15 countries. We didn't close anything down, as you know. We a few things we had to put some limits on, but we didn't close down like they did in other states. They produce a new BMW up there just every minute plus just a few more seconds, depending on the year. Fantastic opportunities, and with all of the electric vehicles and all the high-tech stuff that's coming with Volvo, Mercedes, BMW, and everyone else, all this cybersecurity is going to be even more and more important, because we have to be sure that those IT systems are secure. So that's why you have to have the technical colleges and the universities, particularly the research universities, involved.
I recently had the opportunity to tour the BMW facility, having never been in an automotive assembly plant. And I'm telling anybody who will listen, when they resume the public tours, put that on your bucket list. It is a sight to behold.
It is quite something to see. And of course, you know, they go down to, they ship them down to our port of Charleston, which is going to be, once we finish with the dredging that's underway now, it'll be the deepest port on the Atlantic coast. And we're opening up a new terminal, and we turn around and put something on the ship or take it off in something like 26 minutes. Out in California, it takes 2, 3, or 4 hours. I mean, we got so much, and we have an inland port there where the Norfolk Southern goes through Greer and can pick up vehicles and carry them to the port, and the same thing, we have an inland port in Dillon as well. It hooks up with I-95. The inland port in Greer hooks up with I-85, and both have Norfolk Southern and what's the other one, going down to Charleston. It's just remarkable. But we have this infrastructure. We have to fix the roads. We got a lot of work we need to do on the roads, and CSX. We have a lot of work we have to do on the roads. A lot we have to do with broadband, and we're working with our congressional delegation and all of our partners, the co-ops here in the state, to get broadband out to every place. We are really very well positioned to do well, but it's more and more it's going to depend on cybersecurity, because if these systems are not secure, then it'd be like the electricity going off. It just, you're dead.
Well, the commitment in South Carolina to economic development and everything that you just mentioned is so impressive. And back to cybersecurity, thank you for that. The federal government is a partner, particularly through the military. You've mentioned that. Are there other opportunities to access our share of federal funds?
I am confident that yes, and we will be doing that in every way we can. If with the funds that are being sent now from Washington, it's your money going to Washington, coming back to us, as you know. But those federal funds will be available, we know, for broadband. Now, what else will be available for, we don't know. But there's liable to be additional funds coming later that could go to other things as well. Now, how cybersecurity would fit into that, I don't know. But if we have the kind of commitment that we have in our state to see that our infrastructure is strong, broadband being one, cybersecurity of all that, and all that entails is as far as keeping our systems safe and operating, as well as building systems to work within the cybersecurity arena. If we keep that as a high priority, we will, whatever assets are necessary and available, we will bring them to South Carolina and see that they're put in the right place.
Your passion for this subject is admirable, and you've been generous with your time today. Any last word on the subject? Cybersecurity,
it's a new word for a lot of people, but it has been around for a while. We know of institutions that have had their records attached or attacked, and all of those kind of things. We want to be sure that doesn't happen, because if we are vulnerable like that, particularly as in the hospitals, in businesses, in power companies, and those kind of things. If they are subject to malfunction or destruction, then we'd be in serious trouble. So this is something that's very important. But I can promise the people at the conference, as well as the people of our state, that those involved in commerce and in the security of the state are well aware of the importance of this. And with 8 major military bases in South Carolina, and the Coast Guard getting ready to concentrate even more to be sort of like a 9th base in Charleston there, the importance of cybersecurity is right at the top of everybody's list. But it's going to be good for everybody across the board, rural, urban, large business, small business. It's like bringing in electricity. It's like bringing in interstate highways. It's just one more big thing that needs to be done right. And it's really encouraging for those of us who are trying to direct things in the proper way and put the right collaborations together, to see the willingness, and not only the willingness, but the talent of the people that we have available here to do a great job with it. So it's good news, and what it points to is, once again, it will confirm that South Carolina is the best place in the world to live, work, and raise a family.
That's wonderful. If I didn't know better, I'd think you might work for the Chamber of Commerce. Appreciate your passion for economic development for all in this great state. Thanks for your time. My great pleasure. And we'll thank those who are participating in the conference for their attention, and we'll see what good work comes out of that. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vince Fossey, an Executive Director for Cyber Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Let me also welcome you and all of our viewers in South Carolina and across the nation to today's Now Next Cyber Conference in partnership with our partners, the South Carolina Chamber and CyberSC. We're delighted to continue this conference series for its 4th year, hosting virtually and hopefully again next year in person back in Columbia. I'm delighted to present this next part of the program with General Keith Alexander, who is the co-founder and CEO of IronNet Security and former director of the National Security Agency and Commander U.S. Cyber Command, and Lieutenant General Bruce Crawford with Jacobs Engineering, and formerly the Chief Information Officer for the United States Army. This session is on collective cyber defense and comes at a really important time in the context of the U.S. Cyberspace Solarium Commission's recently released report, which represents a new way of thinking, critical ways of reconceptualizing how the U.S. can best defend itself in an increasingly challenging environment. What's groundbreaking about the Commission's report is its bold support and clear explanation of an idea that has been long discussed, but many have not fully understood. And that's the need for collective defense in cyberspace. General Alexander, welcome, sir. On its surface, collective cyber defense seems to have similarities to mutual defense treaties and alliances like NATO, commonly referred to. Can you touch a little bit on what collective cyber defense is and why it is, what's being done to achieve it today?
Well, thanks, Vince. Yes, I can. And first, it's an honor to be here with the Chamber of Commerce and here in South Carolina, alongside General Bruce Crawford. An honor to be here. So when you think about collective defense, you've hit it on the head when you talked about NATO. You think about NATO, if every country there was to defend itself and only call other countries when something bad has happened, after it's happened, that would be a catastrophe in the physical world. Yet that's what we do in the cyber world. Every company today defends itself and shares information when it knows what's going on. So they have to find the information, then they can share it. This is a difficult part. Imagine all the companies in South Carolina right now, every one of them doing the best they can to defend their company. and down the streets another company doing the same thing. There is no radar picture, if you will, for cyber. So collective defense helps us bring together a radar picture where we can see collectively what's going on in the cyber world. That allows us at network speed to share knowledge, to crowdsource, to take advantage of all the people that we have that are doing cybersecurity. I think that's the future of cyber defense. And that's why we created our company. And that's where I think this needs to go.
Thank you, sir. That's a great way to pick up and bring General Crawford, who recently joined Jacobs Engineering as a Senior Vice President for Critical Mission Support, into the conversation. I really like how you laid out the importance of intelligence sharing. And Jacobs announced with IronNet, which is one of the largest providers of threat detection and response for collective defense. According to this report, together you'll be providing advanced machine learning and an artificial intelligence technology to trace unforeseen and unknown threats. Can you talk a little bit about some of the insights into how this partnership unfolded and what we can expect from it in the future?
Well, Vince, thank you very much. And it's being a South Carolinian, I just wanted to say up front, many thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for pulling this together, because I think it's key to our future defense. But I also wanted to say it's good to be back home, even if it's just virtually back home. A couple of things. There's really two key points and two key reasons why we thought that this partnership was strategically important. So number one was unity of purpose. And then the second reason was something that's a little bit less tangible, but very important, and is that we thought that we were a good culture match with IronNet. And so to the point of unity of purpose in solving hard problems, what I'll say up front is Jacobs has spent, company's been here for about 70 years. But more importantly, and germane to this conversation, we spent about the last 18 months really building almost $1 billion cyber and intelligence business. And so in the process of growing these businesses, we recognize the importance of public-private partnerships, which was mentioned by the governor and also mentioned by General Alexander, as called out in both the Cyber Solarium report, and it's also been acknowledged in the recent POTUS Exhort. But what really caught our eye was IronNet's concept of collective defense, especially the transition from a traditional mindset of focusing on tracking signatures to really a transition into thinking. And when you think about it, it's kind of a bold move, but transition in thinking to integrate the tracking and monitoring of patterns of life, really leveraging, as General Alexander talked about, this whole idea of wisdom of the crowd to his NATO example. The second point with respect to culture match, like IronNet, I can tell you that Jacobs views its investment in people. And I know we'll have some discussions throughout the day about the importance of talent, but Jacobs views its investments in people and talent, not just technology, as one of the great differentiators. And so in the end, this idea of collective defense really got our attention because we truly believe that we're stronger together, to the points that have been made earlier.
And General Crawford, just to bring in General Alexander again, I think you both have talked a little bit about the importance of collective action, the importance of not defending individual lanes of effort, but you have to beat all of us to beat the rest of us. And that's something that Chris Inglis has talked about as well, our nominee for National Cyber Director. And General Alexander, I know you work with him both as Director of the NSA and Commander of Cybercom, but what are some of the problems that you saw that are facing the private sector that you felt this partnership could help address?
So that's a great question. And first, I would just reemphasize something that General Crawford brought out, a cultural match. When you think about the Army and what we did, what we spent the last 18 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, one of the things I found out is that it takes a team to work together. And that teamwork about let's do what's good to solve the mission is really important. And it set that the same cultural approach that Jacobs and IronNet has. What do we need to do to help defend companies? And it was two parts. It was what's in the Solarium Commission working together. And it's also by companies in the cyber realm working together to provide a better package to other companies that are supported. What you cannot afford to have happen is 10 different cyber companies come in and you have to piecemeal it all together. Imagine a comprehensive solution based on the foundation for collective defense that brings this stronger capability together. I think that's what Jacobs' consulting expertise and their technical expertise, aligned with what we do, helps us for customers around the world. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I think it's part of the future.
Thanks, General Alexander. And if you both have touched on the importance of the workforce issue, and we're getting some great questions from the audience as well. So please do send those in. General Crawford, talking a little bit about the technology side, during your time as the Army's Chief Information Officer, your team stood up the Army's first ever Enterprise Cloud Management Office. Today, there are movements to the cloud service providers to be responsible for ensuring their customers can be identified with traceable information pointers to better enable association of cyber intrusions. Given your experience and the work that you're doing now, does that fit into the broad framework of collector cyber defense, and how so?
Oh, absolutely. You know, General Alexander has mentioned one of the shortfalls has been visibility. And leveraging AI and ML enabled capabilities and the wisdom of the crowd to provide the visibility that's required. What's interesting is one of the reasons why about a year and a half ago, we stood up the Army's, for the first time, the Army's Enterprise Cloud Management Office, and now the Army's Enterprise Cloud Management Agency, a one-of-a-kind organization, was to increase visibility. Because at that time, there were over 100 different disparate cloud contracts, all kind of doing their own thing, and we didn't have the ability to really see and understand, as was mentioned earlier, the ability, you can't defend what you can't see. And so one of the reasons that we brought this capability together was to increase visibility. What I'll tell you, so it's a couple things. I think the collective defense offering by IronNet and Jacobs, what's important about it is it can be extended into public, private, and hybrid cloud environments. And this is going to enable customers to not be on an island by themselves anymore, but it's going to enable customers to rapidly collect traffic across private cloud and public clouds, both on-premise and off-premise, and imply what we've talked about with respect to these AI and ML-enabled capabilities and detection capabilities and crowdsourced intelligence in order to mitigate risk. So good question. I appreciate you bringing that up. And it's been about a year and a half ago. But I think that there are some similarities when you think about the reason why I decided that it was a good idea to establish the Enterprise Cloud Management Office and the capabilities of an IronNet and Jacobs partnership with respect to increasing our visibility.
And General Crawford, you're probably about a year ahead of where this administration is renewed focused on cloud. The recently released cyber executive order is focused on developing a cloud security strategy, principles, and furthering migration in a harmonized way across the federal civilian agencies. And want to also talk a little bit about a host of initiatives being led by federal agencies to enhance cybersecurity and cyber defense. The Cyberspace Solarium Commission generated a host of legislative and policy recommendations that are intended to increase the prominence and prioritization of cyber, and DoD is leading those efforts in Defend Forward and Persistent Engagement. General Alexander, having served as Director of NSA and Commander of Cyber Command, how does collective defense relate to Cyber Command and DoD's Defend Forward and Persistent Engagement efforts?
So one of the issues that I faced when I ran Cyber Command, we had the mission to defend the nation. We couldn't see it. So attacks that go on against our country, the Defense Department, who has a mission to defend the nation, can't see attacks on critical infrastructure or other companies. Look at the SolarWinds hack, the Microsoft hack. Both of those were invisible to the Defense Department and the government. They could not see it because those companies can't share the information in a reasonable manner. I think the Solarium Commission hit a key point, as General Crawford brought out. We need to share, but we also need to share the right information. It's got to be real-time information, not about what you know, because what you know you're already defending against, but what you don't know, the unknown. So that's anomaly detection. And that's the machine learning AI and the way that we've come together between Jacobs and IronNet. We need a solution that builds that radar picture. And so when I think about collective defense, the mission for Cyber Command and NSA, defend the country from attacks. It's not to look in your networks. Private companies need to do that. They should do that, anonymize the data and share it. But the government needs to know who's attacking them, who's attacking the victims like SolarWinds, and how do we respond when a nation state is attacking our companies? That's what we need to look at, because I think this is going to grow. It's going to get worse, and there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. We're seeing that with the Colonial Pipeline. And so when we look at this space is where all our money, our intellectual property, our valuables is now stored. And it's going to be attacked by our adversaries. And we need to defend it. So I think this is something that Cyber Command and NSA and the Defense Department needed. And the private sector, that's where Jacobs and IronNet can come in, need to build the private sector version. The government doesn't need to build it. They need to see it. So we can help see it. We can help them see through that radar picture what's going on.
That's well put, sir. And General Crawford, I want to go back and draw on an audience question that just came in, and something that I think speaks to your expertise. There's some stigma associated with the cloud and cloud migration, that it's not as secure as either on-prem or traditional IT. How might you counsel organizations that are looking at their architecture and are considering migrations to the cloud? Is this something that is safe, not safe? How do we ensure it's a high level of security?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. The first thing I would say is upfront, acknowledge that, remember, cloud is a means to an end. It's not the end itself, right? What this is really about is step one. Before you think about migrating to the cloud, you've got to think about what it is that you want to migrate. Essentially meaning you got to think about your data. All right. Most organizations, and this is probably something that's unique to all, are looking at their data and they're thinking through, okay, so how much of this data is authoritative data that really needs to rest in a cloud hosting environment? And how much of this data is duplicative, meaning I need to divest of non-authoritative data sources? And so there should be only one source of data that says who Vince Voti actually is, where he's from, how tall he is, et cetera, not 20. And so key point being, before you start to think about a migration to the cloud, think about the crown jewels and really think about the migration of your data. Because if you don't do that, a couple of things are going to happen. One, you're not going to get the data that you really need in the cloud. But two, it's going to be a very, very almost expensive and almost sustainable journey, is what I would offer.
Thanks, General Crawford. And we've got about 5 minutes left. So if there are other audience questions, we of course welcome those. General Alexander, many of our viewers and right now work with and own small and mid-sized businesses. Collective cyber defense seems to be a complex and resource demanding on its surface, requiring a significant amount of information sharing and collaboration. How do you operationalize collective cyber defense for our small and medium-sized businesses, and how should they be thinking about their role in ensuring our nation's high level of security and resilience?
So that's a great question. You know, I guess I'm a small business owner too. We have about 300 people, and when you think about it, you know, these are companies that are struggling. All small companies struggle through a lot of things. I'm finding that out one day at a time. And cyber is no different. And the CEO and the C-suite and the board, they wonder, where do we take risk? And in cyber, this is the issue now with the rampant amount of ransomware that we're seeing, the growth in that, and the collateral effects that we're seeing from attacks like NotPetya and others. This is a huge problem for companies. So the nice part about collective defense is you don't have enough people to solve your problem. Imagine 90 banks out there, all mid-size. They're all focused on this problem. They have 10 people working on it. That's 10 people trying to protect their bank, and down the road is another bank with 10 people trying to protect it. Imagine if those 90 people work together collectively. They'd have 900 people defending those banks. Which is better? This isn't a tough problem. And so what you get is two parts. You'll actually want companies like Jacobs and IronNet to give you a collective defense, bring that together, economy of scale, and better defense. I think that's the future. That's where we're going with cybersecurity. We need to do that. And it actually, who's it best for? The small and mid-sized companies. That's what we organize it on. Driving the price down, bringing people together, collective security, I think, is the future.
Thanks, General Alexander. General Crawford, you talked a bit about how Jacobs has built a $1 billion threat intelligence company, and that takes a lot of technology and a number, a very significant workforce. And General Alexander just touched on the workforce question as well, and we've got one from the audience. Where are you finding, where's Jacobs finding the next generation of cyber warriors?
Well, a couple of places. The first thing you've got to do when you're looking for talent is you've got to acknowledge that the future, so it's almost like you've got to reimagine the workforce of the future. And you've got to think through how you rapidly transition from, I call it a legacy mindset of a focus on certifications to a focus on the actual skills that are going to be required to defend the country. So that's step one. I think where you find them is exactly where, like some of the efforts that you see going on in the region, where you have the state of South Carolina partnering regionally with places like Fort Gordon, who's developing talent both on the civilian side and the military side, really leveraging back to this wisdom of the crowd, but applying that uniformly when it comes to regional partnerships. I just close by saying the most important thing that small and medium businesses, given that they literally are the backbone of business and innovation for the country, can do is engage in regional efforts and engage in efforts like what you see going on today. Because of their lack of resources, what this does is it fills the void for them, because it allows them to kind of capture the best ideas of those who are in this community of practice and apply them uniformly to not only defend their intellectual property, but also contribute to the defense of the nation. So this really is about regional engagement and capitalizing on the government, the military, the academia, and the private sector investments, of which both Jacobs and IronNet will be participating in.
Well, General Crawford, thanks. That was a perfect way, I think, to end this segment. And General Alexander, sir, thank you for being with us this morning. We really appreciate your participation in this important conversation, advancing the dialogue on collective cyber defense. It's important not only to small and mid-sized businesses, but its importance to the nation's cybersecurity. Thank you for being with us. I'd like to now introduce the next panel that will focus on cybercrime-as-a-service and ransomware. Our colleague Shannon Vavra, a reporter with CyberScoop, is here to introduce her panel and lead the next conversation. Thank you, and Shannon, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a conversation on ransomware as a service and cybercrime as a service. I'm Shannon Vavra, and I'm a reporter at CyberScoop, where I cover the NSA and Cyber Command and other cybersecurity issues. It's a timely panel we have today, and we have excellent panelists joining us, including Nitin Natarajan, the Deputy Director at CISA over at DHS, Raj Samani of McAfee, Megan Stifel from the Global Cyber Alliance, and we also have Harry W., who is a Technical Director for Incident Management over at the NCSC. Thank you all for joining us today as well. I want to kick us off by sort of setting up the landscape of everything that's happened in the last several weeks. We're still uncovering facts from the Colonial Pipeline ransomware incident. In recent days, of course, there's been other ransomware attacks that we've seen around the world, including in Ireland, which has affected their healthcare system, and they're still working to recover from that. And in recent days, the FBI has issued an alert on certain ransomware gang Conti and all of the hospitals and schools that they've been hitting. And we've really seen this ramp up over the last several years. According to many private sector analyses, ransomware has jumped up by upwards of 300% compared with 2019 and compared to 2020. And so I want to bring in Raj. I wonder if you could kick us off and talk a little bit about the trends that you've been seeing change over the last several years with ransomware as a service, and some of the concerning trends you're seeing now that you think we need to get a better handle on moving forward.
Well, thank you. We have to acknowledge the business model that fuels ransomware. Historically, there was almost a one-to-one relationship between the attacker and the victim. And certainly what's changed, I would say, from 2016 is this ransomware as a service economy. And in as much, you don't need technical skills in order to be part of this ransomware economy. These affiliates or partners who effectively go out and carry out attacks for a share of the profits really has enabled this scale. And of course, these affiliates are getting better. They're finding ways into companies and really able to demand like ransoms upwards of about up to $50 million, because they find a way to really put the boot onto the throat of organizations.
And I wonder if, Nitin, you could also jump in and tell us a little bit about what you're seeing from the CISA perspective over at the Department of Homeland Security, and how you're thinking about the challenge moving forward.
Thanks, Shannon. I think, as Raj mentioned, we're definitely seeing an increase over the last number of years, right? And I think that we're seeing the targets to be more broad in scope. So where traditionally folks looked at, large businesses and those that were perceived for deep pockets, we're seeing it impact a lot of kind of non-traditional entities that we wouldn't have thought of 5+ years ago. You mentioned hospitals. We're seeing impacts against schools, against local governments, organizations that traditionally don't have the resources to have that kind of a strengthened cyber architecture. And so that's why I think it's more important as we look at this collaboratively to make sure that we're all working together, both in the private sector and state, local, tribal, territorial governments to really kind of protect that cyber ecosystem against what we're going to continue to see as an increase in attacks in years to come. I mean, I really kind of look at it in 3 ways and looking at 3 elements. How do we, one, disrupt the ransomware operations and the payment schemes, right? Really more in that kind of law enforcement realm. How do we take the fight to the enemy, right? And this is in collaboration with the intelligence community, law enforcement, military and others, and our diplomatic channels. And really the third piece is how do we harden the targets, right? How do we increase resilience amongst critical infrastructure, amongst large, small, medium-sized businesses, against governments at all levels? And really, how do we increase that resilience and make them more secure? And that's really what we're looking at, is how do we work with our partners to do that through a number of different types of mechanisms. But it's only going to increase as we go forward in the future, and we really need to make it harder for the adversary to attack. We have to make it costlier for the adversary to attack, and we have to make kind of remove that return on investment for their activities over time.
Thank you. And I wonder if, Harry, you could jump in and tell us your perspective from across the ocean, how you're thinking about the challenges right now, specifically relating to, of course, in Ireland, everything going on these days with the healthcare system and their ransomware attack.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm just, echoing the 2 previous speakers. We're seeing this being incredibly widespread at all levels of organizations in all sectors, from charities through to, major industry. And in my job, I deal with a lot of, deal with incidents that actually happen that come into us where organizations have been affected. And this is by far and away the kind of most impactful thing that can happen to an organization, really. All of your IT stops working, you're in a very, very difficult position. Sadly, a number of organizations don't have good backups that they can fall back to, so they're really at the kind of mercy of these criminals at that point, and it's incredibly damaging. We've been reaching out to our partners over in NCSC Ireland and offering them all the assistance we can over there as well, because these attacks don't see any borders. They're all over the place. They target organizations of just every scale. There seems to be some aspect of sadly, this is slightly anecdotal, but it looks like sectors where people have been seen to pay get hit more often in the future. That one of the challenges is that the attackers have lots and lots of footholds onto networks, and the bit that then takes time is actually going and turning that foothold into full ransomware compromise, and that they look like they're more likely to go and do that in cases where they know that a similar organization has paid up, they know that it's likely to happen again, and therefore we have this kind of problem of once people start to pay in a sector, then lots more organizations get hit, and we see that all over the place at the moment.
And I wonder too, just to bring it back to Ireland, obviously Irish officials have said publicly that they will not be paying out the ransomware demand. And in recent days, there's been reports that Irish officials have obtained a decryption tool. And I wonder if you've been briefed, if you could share with us any updates on that in the sort of technical review, if that decryption tool is viable and will be used, if you're able to divulge.
So I'm limited in what I'm able to say on that. I'm aware of the reporting on that, and as I understand it, there is work going on to make sure. One of the challenges, obviously, in this space, we've worked with organisations who have paid ransoms. There's then the question of, well, how much do you trust the criminals who caused all this damage to your network to recover it? The other challenge, actually, that often people don't think about is, even if you do get the decryption tool, actually deploying that at scale across your estate, actually doing all of the repair necessary. Lots of your systems will not enjoy having been encrypted, and recovery is not just a question of paying the ransom, getting the decryption tool, and magically everything goes back to how it was before. There's a lot of work going on in that space, and I imagine that's what's going on at the moment over at HSE in Ireland.
Thank you. And Meg, I wonder if you could jump in and tell us a little bit about, you've been involved recently with this ransomware task force, you've issued a report in recent weeks. How do you see the landscape of ransomware attacks and how we can get to the left of the problem moving forward? There's a whole host of recommendations you could share with us. I wonder if you could break it down a little bit.
Sure, thanks, Shannon. It's great to be with everyone today, and thanks for having me. So yes, the Global Cyber Alliance partnered with a number of other organizations spearheaded by the Institute for Security and Technology, which is a nonprofit based on the West Coast, in observation of the growing scope and scale of ransomware that occurred, particularly over last year. Nitin already mentioned the number of organizations that are being hit. We're seeing not only that number increase significantly, but also the scale of the demand that's being made, as well as the payment. So we had $40 million, I think, was the report last week. So those observations of those indicators that are just continuing to explode led a number of us to say we need to come together and identify options and make recommendations, not only to the US government, but to other partners and allies. And so a group of organizations, private sector companies, industry, government came together. We were over 50 organizations, developed a number of recommendations, as you identified. And there were really 5 priority recommendations. The first is that we need an international whole of government strategy together with allies to recognize ransomware as a national security threat. The second was to develop opportunities and options for joint ransomware task force. So thinking about how does the government, and also identified a number of organizations in the United States government that work together. It's also the case in many other allies and partner nations. So facilitating better information sharing between these actors. Third, thinking about the ability for organizations to prepare to get to the left of boom space, and thinking about the need for a framework that would help organizations know and be informed about information that's been obtained from prior ransomware incidents to better inform their defenses in the first place. The fourth was thinking about ransomware response and recovery funds. So can we better prepare organizations to reject the option to pay by having better defenses in the first place, but also giving them a backstop to say, okay, one option might be that if they have taken steps to implement the framework that would be developed under these recommendations, would they be supported not up to the point of paying the ransom if they did pay it? So giving them an option to reduce the likelihood of having to pay. And the fifth thing really was to think about cryptocurrencies and the role that they play, whether or not the regulatory environment is as supportive as it can be to those who seek to use cryptocurrencies for economic advancement versus those who seek to use cryptocurrencies to undermine social good and really think about the harms that are happening as a result of the inability to track and trace cryptocurrency exchanges.
Thank you. A much distilled version of the report. Now, you mentioned cryptocurrency. I wonder if we could get Meg and Harry and other panelists to jump in here and talk about how we can deal with criminals who are taking advantage of cryptocurrency to mask their operations and to mask their payments and to avoid law enforcement. What can governments be doing about this? What can the private sector be doing about this? And where do we go from here? Harry, do you want to start us off?
I'll give it a go. I mean, it is a very complex problem. That it's certainly, I think, noticeable that one of the key drivers, as far as I can tell, of ransomware is the fact that there is this method that is very efficient for paying ransoms. There was some ransomware in the past with, there were ransoms that you paid the ransom by buying prepaid cards and things like that, but it wasn't very widespread. I think the fact that there is a widespread, understood, easily usable system for transferring money outside of the conventional banking system has definitely assisted greatly in the rise of ransomware, because it makes the payment much more straightforward and much lower risk for the actors. I'm sadly not an expert on financial controls and kind of understanding how you control a system that is, by design outside of the kind of standard, standard financial control system. I think that's a very difficult space to try and work out.
And I'm curious too, we do have a question already coming in from the audience here. If cryptocurrencies were more transparent, would this reduce ransomware attacks? I'd like to get all of our panelists to weigh in here on what you think can be done there and what work is being done right now with cryptocurrency exchanges, for example, on this kind of question.
I'm happy to kick off. So this is not a cryptocurrency problem. Likewise, much less it's not an email problem, when people click on phishing emails, because the reality is that whether they're using, Bitcoin or Ethereum or something else, criminals will always find a way to adapt. I mean, the Gand Crab crew claimed to have made $2 billion. Well, if they made $2 billion and all of a sudden, this cryptocurrency is not available, they will find something else. They've got the funds and the researchers and the developers to actually build something. So we have to stop blaming technology as, the vehicles to society's ills. This is crime. And just because, cryptocurrency is pseudo-anonymous doesn't mean that we're completely blind to what's occurring. There is a considerable body of work in which we can actively track payments. I mean, just most recently, I think it was 2019, we did analysis into NetWalker ransomware, who actually completely revitalized their entire business model. And we were able to determine within 3 months, they made $25 million US. So there is an entire body of work to be done. And so I think, we have to stop blaming technology for criminal intent. The reality is there are criminals and they will find other ways to be able to extract money from us.
I wonder if Nitin, you want to jump in and talk about this as well. And I'm curious also to open it up to the panelists again. When we talk about, for instance, DarkSide, which the FBI has said was behind the Colonial Pipeline ransomware incident, we're talking not just about one group of criminal actors, we're talking about a criminal syndicate that is essentially the core of ransomware as a service, working with affiliates, multiple parties benefiting from the proceeds. And I'm curious if you could touch on a little bit, do we go after the affiliates? Do we go after the operators of the ransomware? Where is the best way in here to this ecosystem to cripple the ransomware ecosystem?
So I think, to some extent, it's that criminal enterprise, that criminal ecosystem as a whole, right? I mean, we need a multi-pronged approach in collaboration with our partners in order to do this effectively. I think, we can't end up in a game of whack-a-mole, right? I mean, anyone who played whack-a-mole as a kid or even as an adult, knows that it's a never-ending game, right? So I think what we really need to do is work with our partners across both again, kind of what we're looking at on the defensive resilience side with those that are working in our military, law enforcement, and intelligence communities, and to really look at it from that multi-pronged approach in order to take down the broader criminal enterprises that we're dealing with. As Raj said, like, you know, criminals are going to, or crime's going to continue. I mean, if we look at it over the last decades or even the last centuries, right? I mean, criminals have always found an innovative way to continue the attack in some mechanism. So, you know, if we were to magically flip a switch and make, you know, Bitcoin, for instance, completely transparent, they're going to find another way to do it, right? So, I mean, I think there's always going to be that mechanism. What do we want to, you know, we really push focusing on the prevention side. You know, how can we strengthen the ability for businesses, large, small, and governments of all levels globally to really protect themselves? And then how do we work with all of our partners across a variety of issues, everything from information sharing, you know, and response operations, those types of things with our partners to really strengthen that ecosystem. And then again, kind of collectively go after those criminal enterprises from all directions together with our partners to get them shut down.
And I'm curious too, if Meg, you want to chime in here as well on that question.
Sure. So that, again, going back to the recommendations of the report, there are, Raj identified, there are options, of course, for, and there are capabilities to track and trace these transactions. The question really is applying additional levers of transparency, regulatory requirements upon this type of currency an option and an ability to frustrate their activity, which may drive them, hopefully in theory, to a more transparent marketplace where there may be faster opportunities for law enforcement to intercede and intervene to, among other things, issue freeze orders that might prevent the cash out, which is what drives these folks, right? They are driven by money, and allow governments and other actors to slow down the process of ransomware with the goal of, again, slowing down and driving this type of activity to somewhere else, probably. Unfortunately, as others have said, criminals are criminals. They will look for opportunities to continue their and continue to gain money through one mechanism or another. But thinking about all the tools that we have, looking at the application of know your customer requirements, anti-money laundering regulations, and the Bank Secrecy Act, for example, in the United States, to this type of currency, the participants in the ransomware task force thought that those would be useful tools to further frustrate the ransomware networks.
And something that Nitin has brought up in a couple of minutes ago is disrupting the ransomware actors, taking cost to them, whether that's a financial cost or otherwise. And of course, in recent days, we have heard President Joe Biden say that the United States would be interested in going after the criminals behind the Colonial Pipeline ransomware incident. And I'm curious, of course, in recent months, we've seen Cyber Command, the offensive cyber operations unit of the Department of Defense, go after sort of ransomware facilitators like TrickBot, a botnet. Do you all think that using a military approach is the right approach? Should that be the first, let's punch go and use military operations to go after hackers in a ransomware context? Are there other things we should be doing first? I'm curious to hear all your thoughts on this one. Harry,
go ahead.
or Meg, go ahead.
I think Shannon knows me well enough to know that that's not, I don't share that view, right? We really think, and members of the task force, I think, all agree basically that the first step is to have an international coalition be built to take preventative measures and to work to enhance the enforcement capability against these actors. One can imagine the range of results that would happen should other governments follow a similarly, what I would consider to be aggressive model. So do we want to have pick your hostile authoritarian regime similarly whacking us, because as we know, the United States doesn't have the cleanest networks in the world either. So thinking first about making sure that we do have the economic levers in place and the incentive structure right, so that companies are better prepared in the first place, and ensuring that, for example, through the use of response and recovery funds and other preparatory measures, together with better informed law enforcement and intelligence activities, which are also recommendations from the task force, we can begin to really reduce the likelihood of these incidents and reduce the need for there to be military activity as a first step, as opposed to things we can do ourselves internally.
I'd like to maybe agree with or really build on something Nitin said earlier about whack-a-mole. And to do that, I'm going to kind of cast your mind back to 2019 and actually share with you the reality of what will happen as we go out and disrupt a ransomware group. I mean, at the time, the most capable, the most prevalent family going after large enterprises was ransomware by the name of GandCrab. And around about March, we began to witness a drop-off of affiliates. So in other words, those people that were actually doing the attacks began to leave GandCrab at around about version 5.4. And no sooner had 2 to 3 weeks later, the GandCrab crew actually announced that they'd retired. So all of a sudden, everybody's delighted. The fact that this particular group may have been scared or whatever happened, they effectively walked away. All that happened was there was a new ransomware family by the name of Sodanakibi or Revil, which is one of the most prevalent families and some of the most damaging family out there. And all of these affiliates we strongly suspect moved. And that's the reality. There are, if we talk about cutting the head off the snake of ransomware, well, there's hundreds of snakes out there. So one will just continually pop up. I think, it's not as simple as, okay, well, we'll go after them. Actually, back to what Megan mentioned earlier, the reality is when organizations have a server on the internet with a password of welcome, and then kind of question and say, well, how on earth were we hacked? Well, look, there's part of the answer there. So it's a multi-pronged approach we have to take.
And I wonder too, in recent days, we have heard reports of the dark side criminals having difficulty running their operations and gaining access to their computer networks. There were rumors the US government was behind that potential operation. There's been reporting that the US government was not in fact behind that. And I want to see if I can get you on the record here, Nitin. Has the US government launched any sort of disruptive activities targeting DarkSide or its affiliates in recent days? And if you can't say, will Americans be aware if and when that does happen?
So great question, Shannon. So, I mean, obviously within CISA, our main focus is on the defensive side of the house. How do we build resilience? How do we help work with our partners on kind of building defensive cyber operations? I'll defer to my colleagues at NSA and DoD for kind of their operations and their guidelines and how they operate. So.
Great. And I totally understand that. I just have to ask. And generally speaking, from the perspective of the whole audience, something about DarkSide as well is that, according to US intelligence, as President Biden has said, some of the criminals are believed to reside in Russia. How should the government in the United States or other governments be dealing with the fact that these criminals appear to be receiving safe harbor or appear to be being ignored in other countries that allow them to perpetuate their criminal schemes? From the US or from a government perspective, I wonder if Harry and Nitin, you can weigh in on the challenges of working through that issue. And I'd also be curious to hear Raj and Meg's takes as well. Thanks.
Certainly from my perspective, that does appear to be, that is a widely reported aspect of this. I think there's similar challenges, I suspect, to the question around ransomware in this space, that actors are all over the place. They're located probably in multiple jurisdictions, in multiple locations. Would we see movement of them to other jurisdictions? It has to be targeted as a kind of whole attack across the entire ecosystem. Because actually, if you get one jurisdiction to change their rules, will you just see people moving? It's an incredibly complex question, that one.
Yeah, I'll just add to Harry. I think, as he mentioned, for us, it's the international collaboration. It's working closely with our allies against wherever that enemy may be, right? So I think we have very close collaboration with our colleagues over in the UK, but also colleagues throughout the world. I think one of the things that really surprised me coming back into federal service here 3 months ago was the significant increase in the volume of international engagement that CISA has with our partners throughout the country. And whether that's direct cert-to-cert relationships, whether it's helping build and increase cyber resilience in other nations that may have more immature systems that are looking to grow and gain. A couple of months ago, folks might have seen we published CISA Global, our kind of strategic plan to look at our international engagement, to work with our partners so that we could learn from them and that they could learn from us as we continue to do this. So I think that as we look at actors and whether it's in Russia or really whatever country that they're going to be based out of and operating from, it's that collective of us with our international partners are going to be able to work towards tackling these challenges. And there are massive challenges. But I think we are stronger together, and we're putting those frameworks in to work more closely with our partners day by day.
Shannon, I'll build just a minute on something that Nitin mentioned. It's really one of the recommendations and observations was from the task force is this need that all parts of the government are talking from the same sheet of music when they're engaging with either their allied partners, but also representatives of these countries believed to be harboring or otherwise providing safe haven or for these actors. So if, for example, in the United States, the Secretary of Commerce is speaking with someone either in a partner nation to say, what are you doing about ransomware? How can we better work together to begin to combat this at a global scale? But similarly, are you putting pressure on, if it's Russia or other countries who are, again, believed to be providing safe haven? We really need to continue to keep this at the top of the agenda. There are lots of other things going on in the world, and it's not to say that those aren't also important, but the growth that we've seen in ransomware over the past year is remarkable. And it really will take a whole of society effort, not only in the United States, but elsewhere, to begin to really decrease this type of malicious cyber behavior. We don't want it to continue to spiral out of control.
Now, in recent months, there was a statement issued by the Five Eyes that said, these nations, so the US, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, we want to work more on combating ransomware together. And I'm curious if Nitin and Harry, you could walk us through sort of the day-to-day reality of, have things changed since that statement was issued? And what does that collaboration and information sharing look like on a live day-to-day level?
Sure. So, I mean, we talk with our colleagues on a daily basis globally, right? So we have daily engagements with our colleagues. We had pre-COVID a lot of in-person engagements. We've shared liaisons so we can understand how each other work day to day, right? It's one thing to have a 1-hour meeting in a day. It's one thing to work more closely day to day with each other and really understand the nuances of our respective systems and what we bring to bear. So we're looking at really kind of expanding how do we continue that engagement day to day. On information sharing, it's something that has always been kind of near and dear to my heart, and I've been focused on for a long time now. And to me, it's a matter of how do we get the right information to the right people in a timely manner that results in more informed decision making, right? So it's not just the quantity of reporting, right? So I don't measure success by, we shared 500 reports with the UK today, right? And that's our target, and we won. It's how much of the information are we able to share that's timely, that can result in more informed decision making, that can result in action by our partners. How do we ingest information in a timely manner? How are we able to use that to guide our decision making and the actions that we take? And really looking at those efforts and how do we have that collaboration to strengthen that information sharing efforts. There's always going to be a way to do it faster, quicker, better, and we want to continue to kind of push that envelope and how we do that. Again, with our international partners as it comes to those engagements, it's also the same kind of approach that we take our information sharing with our private sector colleagues, as well as state, local, tribal, territorial governments.
I mean, I'd just add that, it's not like organizations like mine weren't looking at ransomware as a problem prior to that announcement. What's actually changed is more about focus. Organizations like mine have a huge range of threats that we're trying to defend against. So there's just been a shift of focus, I think, on there. So there is now more work going on in that space, but it's not like this was a completely empty space previously and that no one was doing anything. We've been working on this for years. I've been dealing with ransomware incidents for several years now. It's just that there's now a kind of a more directed focus, and that more resources have been pulled into this. Potentially off other things. It's just you have to kind of balance up the various threats that are out there, and ransomware is sadly not the only one that we have to deal with.
Now, I want to turn our attention to the classic question that is probably on a lot of our audience members' minds today, which is to pay or not to pay the ransom demands. We've seen something Meg mentioned earlier. There was a reported $40 million payment from CNA in recent days, which was really quite a substantial figure to see revealed publicly. At least there's obviously many more incidents behind the scenes that aren't public, and those figures as well. Should businesses be paying? Is all of this publicity around, for instance, Colonial Pipeline and CNA paying their ransoms, encouraging and normalizing the behavior of paying criminals? And what should a framework around payment look like?
Certainly, from my perspective, we would much rather that nobody paid criminals. That we would, in theory, be able to solve the cybercrime, the ransomware problem very quickly if everyone just agreed not to pay ransoms. That is, however, unlikely to ever be possible, and therefore, when it comes down to it, everyone would be better off if nobody paid ransoms. But when it's you in particular who has been affected, and you're looking at the possibility of your company, going out of business, it's a very difficult call to make at that point. I think it's a very complex position to try and take to actually work out what people should or shouldn't do, and we try and support people no matter what their position is within the NCSC. We will help anybody. But yeah, it's a hugely difficult one. But we would highly recommend making sure you have backups so that will actually work, so that you have an option other than paying in order to get your data back.
I'd like to maybe offer up a third option. And so everybody listening to this, please, go to nomoreransom.org and make sure you bookmark that particular site. It actually has over decryption tools freely available at no cost, and you don't even have to enter your email address or contact details at all. And so there is a third option, and I think it'd be good to make sure that people are aware of that.
Yes, although I think people should be aware that there's only going to be limited occasions, sadly, where that's going to work. So don't rely on No More Ransom as your only backup plan.
Exactly.
That was going to be my next question, to see if we could sort of round out. We have a couple of minutes left here to round out the panel with what should businesses be doing now to make themselves a less attractive target to potential ransomware criminals, and what should they do in the unfortunate circumstances where they actually are hit by ransomware? What can they be doing now to prepare? What should they do when that does happen to them?
So I'll take a first stab. I think to some extent, to me, it's recognizing that it's worth the investment, right? Recognizing that investing in your cybersecurity of your organization is a worthwhile investment for your organization, whether you're a large, medium, small business or any level of government. I think that we've spent decades or 15 years plus selling people on the concept of cybersecurity, right? I remember years ago when we had to try to sell the healthcare industry on investing significantly in cybersecurity efforts. So how do we make people understand the value of that investment? And again, looking at the risk paradigm as folks have mentioned, right? As we identify risks, any risk we identify and we don't mitigate, we're accepting, right? So let's make sure that we're all aware of what risk that we're accepting. How do we develop an incident response plan? How do we know how our organization is going to respond to a cyber attack within our organization? We do this for kind of kinetic attacks and fire drills and all these things all the time, right? But what is our plan to respond to a cyber incident? Harry and everyone I think on the panel has mentioned about backup systems and the criticality of having effective backups. Looking at isolating systems, right? So even if they do get in, we kind of prevent that lateral movement across the network. And then reporting the incident, working with us to get that information, to report that the incident has occurred, and to tap into the resources that are available across the country through multiple agencies, right? Through CISA, FBI, and others that can help an organization. So it's, to me, it's get aware of the understanding the scope and scale of what we're facing, understand the risks and threats to your organization, and then take some of those initial steps to help protect your organization, your network, your people, your information, and your business at the end of the day.
Shannon, one of the things that we recognize in the task force is that there is a lot of good information out there. It may be dispersed, but there's a lot of good information out there to help organizations prepare themselves so that they don't become the victim, or that when they are victimized, their incident is less damaging. And so Nitin's identified a number of them. There are a lot of resources on the CISA website. The organization that I work for, the Global Cyber Alliance, has a small business toolkit that's free. Again, we don't require you to register, and it does include references to the No More Ransom resources. But I think that the biggest point that people can do is to be prepared and not panic, because you do have options. Raj has mentioned this. There are hygiene measures that you can take that are largely the personnel investment. If you're running a large enterprise, that's more than just personnel time, but things like multi-factor authentication, having good email hygiene, segmenting networks that Nitin mentioned, thinking about encryption at rest and in transit. There are steps that you can take that don't require you to wait for something to arrive later on. There is no silver bullet here, and it really requires a whole of organization and whole of society effort. The biggest thing that people can do is to do something today to make themselves more secure.
Great. Well, that just about does it for us for this panel. So I just want to thank our panelists for joining us, our audience for listening to us and joining us, and the Chamber for hosting us. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the U.S. Chamber, and thanks again.
Thanks so much, Shannon, and thanks so much to the Ransomware and Cybercrime-as-a-Service panel for their expert views that they just shared. I think it's a great way to pivot into the next part of the conversation, which is on small business cybersecurity. So how can we operationalize some of the things that Nitin, Raj, and Harry, and Megan just talked about from a strategic level, the threat environment, and what that means for small business. So I'd like to welcome back to the Chamber Kirsten Todd, Managing Director for the Cyber Readiness Institute, for about 5 minutes of thoughts on what small businesses can do to improve their cybersecurity, their resilience, and their ability to bounce back from cyber attack. Following her remarks, we'll welcome in Karen Painter-Vandal, an attorney with the Cyber Law Task Force at the University of South Carolina. So thanks for staying with us. And Kirsten, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Vince, and thanks very much to the Chamber for hosting this event. And I'm looking forward to this time with Karen to talk about small business, cybersecurity, and ransomware. One of the things that we certainly know for sure is that in the pandemic, we saw a real uptick in ransomware across all businesses of all sizes, but particularly small businesses. And why that became so important was because we have to appreciate and recognize the role that small businesses play in our digital economy and the role that they play in global supply chains and even domestic supply chains. So what we were seeing was that small businesses were getting attacked and they were having to make split-second decisions about ransomware. They would either pay to ensure that they didn't disrupt their operations and that they continued to be a part of these supply chains, and then be economically challenged, or they wouldn't pay and run the risk of being offline for 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. And what we heard from global manufacturers was that when they lost a small business, even for a couple of days, the impact on their supply chain was so significant that sometimes they would then look to another small business to play that role. All of this to say what we already know, which is that when we lose small businesses, we lose key components of our global supply chains. So what can we do when we look at ransomware? We talk a lot about the symptoms of the problem, to pay or not to pay, where this all comes from. But what we really need to be focused on, it's really probably not a but it's an and, what we absolutely need to be focused on right now, because we're not going to be able to address this in a day or 2 days or a month, is what we can do to help small businesses become more cyber ready, more cyber resilient. And by doing that, it's focusing very much on how to harden the systems. And the good news and the bad news is that they're very easy steps. They're not always taken, but there are 3 things that small businesses can really focus on. And we heard a little bit about this in the previous panel, but it's about authentication, because when a business is attacked by ransomware, it's because a malicious actor has gotten into the network. And so being able to have strong authentication, which is strong passwords, certainly multi-factor authentication, we're seeing great industry movement as well as government movement on mandating multi-factor authentication, which is a long time coming, because now you're also seeing technologies not giving you the choice to opt into it, but actually making it a default, which is more and more important. It's about patching systems. That is very easy. Have a patching program within your small business, whether you're 2 employees, 20, 200, or 2,000, to ensure that your small business is patching whenever a patch is released. And it's about backups. When a ransomware attack occurs, it's ensuring that you have a workable backup that can be accessed very quickly and immediately. And so as we look at all of these pieces, we have to look again at that prevention, that resilience, and the readiness. And this is where a government effort and the work of the ransomware task force that Megan shared, as well as a lot of the other efforts and that we've seen from CISA, being able to look at how to create a more resilient infrastructure so that we're not asking the question of whether or not we should pay, but we're preventing ransomware from being the issue, the malicious activity that it has become. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Karen. I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Kirsten. Appreciate it. All very good points. But I'm sure everyone who has participated in this conference will agree that there are so many different types of small to medium-sized businesses out there. What I can't understand as a breach coach, because they come to me when they suffered the ultimate incident that may or may not result in a breach, is that they still are struggling with handling risk and understanding mitigation strategies. Why is it, and I'm sure you and I both know, that small to medium-sized businesses are targeted by these cyber attackers? And why do they have such a slow learning curve?
Well, obviously, as you said, I think what we've come to learn and we understand, and this has been the issue with small business cybersecurity for so long, is that they're under-resourced. So when you look at cybersecurity and small businesses, they have a lack of IT, a lack of an awareness of vendor management. And this isn't to say that they don't know what they should do, they just don't have the resources. If we think about small cybersecurity, it became a line item in the budget of these businesses in recent memory. That this is a new function and mission that's critical to what a business does, that people and businesses are having to allocate new funding for. So it's a lack of education, training, all of these components. And again, you know, small businesses, when you tell them, they're extremely willing, and it's not to put all of them into one bucket, but it's not that they're not aware, it's that the resources available to them are limited, or they don't know where to find them. And that's one of the things that I think is really important that we can do from a government side, is being able to create a repository of small business resources, so they have, you know, a place to go and they know when they've been attacked what they should do, but also how to prevent attacks from happening.
Right. I find that with regard to responding to some of these breaches, whether or not that organization has a strong IT department, whether or not they outsource IT, may make a difference in the success of the response effort. Have you seen that as well?
Well, I think certainly, because when there's that awareness, when you've got the IT function either in the business or outsourced, then it's become a priority. And that goes to being able to prioritize your assets and where your vulnerabilities are. I will make a comment for small businesses that it's important that when you outsource a function, you're not outsourcing your responsibility and accountability, and that it requires just this ongoing educational ecosystem and educational loop for these small businesses. And that's why, to the extent that the federal government, as well as nonprofits, Megan's with the Global Cyber Alliance, I work with the Cyber Readiness Institute, there are many of us out there, just that awareness of the current threats and what small businesses need to be doing, being able to share that as easily and accessibly as possible is so critical.
Yeah. What practical advice would you give organizations if they have become aware of ransomware, the threat of ransomware? What would you tell them with regard to how to properly prepare for a ransomware attack?
So at the Cyber Readiness Institute, we focus on human behavior, and we do that with the awareness that small businesses don't have the financial resources. And so what that means is there are steps that businesses can take to create a foundation of security to help them prevent and mitigate the impact of ransomware. So specifically, making sure that your employees understand what strong authentication looks like. So a passphrase of 15 characters or more. I'll get very specific and prescriptive. Multi-factor authentication. It should be enabled across all devices. Software updates. I mean, we have seen the small businesses and the large businesses get breached just because they're not patching when those updates are coming through. And educating your employees so that they feel the responsibility and accountability for their role in cybersecurity is an important step in creating that culture of cyber readiness within an organization of cybersecurity. And then obviously the big one is ensure you have a backup. So that if all of those other pieces have you're still vulnerable, that a backup on a separate network that can be instituted quickly is available to you.
Yeah. Sometimes when I have people come to me who need an investigation based upon an incident, I'll always tell them that you're not judged as much by the attack as you are by your response effort. And for those organizations, small to medium-sized businesses who have not given thought to having an incident response plan and team in place, it's going to be virtually impossible for them to respond within the first 72 hours. It's going to be impossible for them to contain that incident to reduce their exposure. Would you agree with that?
It's such an excellent point, Karen. And I often say I worked with a company, a large bank abroad, and the CISO would say, I don't measure my success by what I've prevented. I measure my success by how I've responded. So there has to be that awareness that a breach is not a demonstration of failure. If it does happen, it's how you manage that. So incident response plans are critical. Being able to exercise how your organization is going to respond when something does happen. There are templates out there that you can customize for your business that are very easy, but going through it so you understand this is where my vulnerabilities are, these are where my strengths are, and also who are the partners I need to call on to ensure that I can respond quickly if I need that extra level of support, which in all likelihood is certainly the case.
Yeah, and I think with regard to those incident response plans, the playbooks are so important. You don't need a 50-page incident response plan that says basically nothing, and you just think it's good because it's 50 pages. It could be 5 pages long, but it could include a playbook on ransomware attacks, a playbook on business email compromise attacks, so that you know what decision maker has been thought out in advance without going back and trying to make decisions with regard to should we pay to suppress data, for example. The new double extortion ransomware model that's out there right now. I would imagine that a lot of people have ransomware playbooks, but they have not updated them to include a strategy for what do we do if we're attacked by dark side. And even though we have good backup and we really don't need a decryption key, we know that they have exfiltrated highly sensitive and possibly embarrassing information that we may not want to have posted on a leak site. What do we want to do there? Do we want to pay? I know we had this discussion with the prior panel, but that is something that should be discussed well in advance and be made part of that ransomware playbook. So don't put it away, and certainly bring it out and make sure that you update it along with not just the strategy, but the players as well, because people come and go in any organization. Now, I know Cyber Readiness Institute recently made 5 recommendations to the Biden administration. So congratulations to you on that. I know the executive order just rolled out. We'll see what happens with that. Every idea is a good idea, but you focus on the small to medium-sized businesses, and probably because the stats are not in their favor if they suffer an attack. 60% of small to medium-sized businesses go out of business within a year. What were some of the recommendations that were made by your organization?
So I will get to that. I did want to make one point of what you just said, because I think this is really critical, is that you don't want to be facing those big decisions when you're in the middle of an event, like what you said about ransomware. And that's a really important to exercise those issues. So one of the key recommendations that we have is to create a repository of small business resources within the government. And we recommend that that be done at CISA, given its cybersecurity authorities and also the amount of increased authority and responsibility it's been given. We also talk about an awareness campaign that focuses on authentication. We have a recommendation for how to build out the cyber workforce by focusing on colleges and creating internships from recent graduates that can work with small businesses. So these are some of the efforts in order to help small businesses become more cyber secure, but also really about creating that workforce and the strength in the workforce.
So when all else fails and people really do not follow best practices and they're unfortunate to have suffered a cyber attack, one of the first things we always ask as a breach coach or incident response counsel is, do you have cyber liability insurance? Because it certainly makes the attack less painful if we know that they've transferred that risk to a cyber liability policy of insurance. What does the cyber liability insurance market look like right now? I don't think it looks great. What are your thoughts?
I think it's very challenging, and it's very challenging for small businesses because they have to understand what they're getting and what they're not getting. And we're continuing to look at how do we help to take the mystery out of this. There's certainly a lot of examples early on where businesses would have insurance and then they'd have a breach and it wouldn't be covered. But when you look at a business, if it doesn't have insurance, it's deemed negligent because it hasn't had that responsibility. I also think we have to look very closely at what the insurance market is doing for the ransomware market. We have evidence that malicious actors troll ransomware policies to determine where the large payouts are. So we've got to really be looking at how to make cyber insurance more accessible and practical for small businesses so that they're clear on what it covers, they're clear on what they need. And it doesn't have to be the holy grail all at once. This is a crawl, walk, run. But if we can get more businesses to manage their risk through insurance, that will certainly be more effective and help those businesses, those small businesses, become more resilient.
Yeah, I think it's very important, the point that you made with regard to understanding the policy of insurance. Some people come in, they think they have $1 million worth of coverage. They find out they have a sublimit of 100,000. It can make a difference in the response effort. But keep in mind, AXA XL has just indicated to everyone that going forward, they are not going to be covering extortion payments. I think that was just overseas that they sent that message, but certainly a lot of these developments in ransom payments, including the CNA payment, are making a difference in the insurance market.
And I think AXA was attacked by ransomware after they made that claim. I mean, it is a malicious market.
They were also in the tower that paid for the CNA ransom payment. So it's nice to be in the news. I think Vince is looking at me, telling me that I need to hand it back over to him. But Kirsten, thank you very much for your comments. Very well received, very good information for anyone in small, medium business organization. So thank you very much. Vince, with that being said, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Karen and Kirsten. Really appreciate your comments. And at this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 10:45. That was a dense morning and a lot to digest. So grab some coffee, grab a glass of water. We'll see you back here at 10:45. Thank you.